Well, hey there, idiots. Welcome back to Observe. In today's video, I'm going to be analyzing the nonverbal communication of a myriad of different people across a myriad of different times, but all speaking about one subject, and that is, well, aliens. Let's go ahead and roll the intro. Okay, due to the nature of this video, I would like to be able to offer a couple of disclaimers that I also offer rather regularly, really. First, nonverbal communication is on average 70 to 80% accurate, with a little bit of leeway on either side. We always shoot for that higher end of things, but there is that constant and prevalent potential to fail, to misread something. I wanted to go ahead and let you know about that up front, and in light of that, I also wanted to let you know that these videos are designed for education and entertainment purposes only. They should never be used in a legal or professional setting. Just be aware of that. Now, this video has been compiled once again by my lovely wife. She is not here in studio today. She is out and about working in her garden, actually. So she's not going to be watching these with me, but big shout out again to her for compiling all of these for me to be able to bring to you for the first time. In light of that, since I have not been able to establish baselines for all of these, however many people, I'm assuming there's more people than one in here, but I have not been able to establish baselines, which means that this read will be working off of universal tells and some generalities that exist in nonverbal communication. That being said, that means that it will be a little bit less accurate than it could be if you did your due diligence or had the ability to do said due diligence as well. So just keep that in mind. But before we dive into the actual video itself, let's go ahead and turn things over to Logan so we can hear about today's sponsor.
Hi, I'm Logan, voice over Logan. You can tell that it's me because of the amazing crystal clear audio. That is, you could hear that amazing quality if you were using earbuds from today's sponsor, Raycon. Let's be real, most of us have heard at least one or maybe 100 or so segments by YouTubers about Raycon, but that's with good reason. Raycon is doing things differently than other brands out there and prioritize the customer experience from start to finish. They are an excellent option for anyone who would like the high quality premium sound without the premium price tag. Raycon earbuds give you 6 hours of playtime, reliable and seamless Bluetooth pairing, rich, warm low tones, and crisp, clear high tones. All of this tied together with a comfortably snug, noise-isolating fit. However, if these features aren't enough to pique your interest, they also have a 45-day free return policy. But wait, there's more. If you go to buy to buyraycon.com/observe or click the link in the description below now, you can get 15% off of your order. So summertime's coming up, right? Nice warm weather, fun outdoors activities, and this is where your Raycons can really come to benefit you in real life, day-to-day activities. Be it frolicking like a fairy nymph through the fields or prairies nearby, or swinging on your conveniently located and very aesthetic rope swing near those prairies or fields. Heck, you could even use it while gardening in your garden, which is next to your swing, next to your prairies or fields. But the real question is that everybody has isn't where can I use these, but more so how well do they stay in?
And it's hard to just say that. It's hard to just be like, yeah, they stay in really well. It's easier to show that, like we're doing here. All humor set aside though, I have been using these for several months now, and they are by far my favorite wireless earbuds that I own. I use them every single day. I really appreciate the sound quality, and the way that they do fit is not only comfortable, but it does an excellent job at blocking out noise. So if this is something that's interesting to you, go ahead and consider following that link in the description below to be able to capitalize on the 15% off deal that Raycon was able to offer through Observe. So again, it is buyraycon.com/observe, or you can just click the link in the description below and that will be able to take you there as well. Regardless, 15% off, very high quality earbuds. I definitely suggest them. Go check them out. Links in the description. Now, back to our main video here. Well, thank you. Voiceover Logan, I believe. It looks like you were having a lot of fun outside in the very warm 90-degree weather that we saw out there, and I love your suit. Anyways, moving on to the actual analysis itself, I've got it all set up here. Let's go ahead and dive in.
Glinda, who says she too has been abducted since childhood.
Okay, so this is obviously working with a young woman who says that she was abducted by aliens. I want to let you know something. People who believe that they have been abducted by aliens are going to show authentic nonverbal communication because they genuinely believe what they are saying. Nonverbal communication doesn't tell you factual truth. It tells you the perceived truth of the person who is displaying it. What I mean by that is these people could genuinely believe that they were abducted, so their nonverbal communication will be showing authentic synchronized body language. I'm assuming. I don't know yet. But if they do believe it, that's what we will see. It won't let us know that it's true or not. It will simply let us know whether or not they think it's true. That being said, from what I understand, there should be a myriad of more somber, serious reads and some funny ones scattered in there as well. So let's just go ahead and see what happens and have a good time with it all the way around.
Since what age do you remember?
5.
5 years old. And at 5 years old, what happened? So, some of what Dr. Mack described earlier here?
Right. I had a I consciously remembered my experience when I was 5.
So a few things that I want to point out here right away. First, she was not born in America, so there is going to be some cultural differences here that we might be having to navigate through. I don't quite recognize her accent quite yet, but something that I will note on her nonverbal communication, she is looking up and down and off to the side while she's recollecting. Now, there is the idea that directional IQs, the direction that you look, has something to do with your psychological processing and whether or not it's made up or fake or so on and so forth, and it's simply not true. It's been disproven that directional IQs even remotely work. What has been semi-proven by AI intelligence and an AI algorithm that finds patterns is that when people are recollecting things, they will look off in some direction, up, down, or to the side, and narrow their eyes often. That would be a genuine recollection pattern that you could see on the face that AI found. So that is something that we could take note of. She is looking off and to the side or up. She's looking away from the direction that she was looking before. We're not seeing any of that narrowing of the eyes, so it's hard to be able to say whether or not this is authentic recollection or her trying to recall the lie that she's telling. Let's see if we can find out.
But I had bits of it that were missing. And what I remember is that through my wall came some beings around my bed. And I ran between...
Correction, it sounds like I may have just misheard her earlier. She does sound to have an American accent, so we can throw away all that I just said a second ago. So that's interesting. Let's keep watching.
Between them and ran out of the room into my mother's room to hide from them. And what happened is they followed me in there, and that's the last I remember.
Okay, so this is interesting. I'm going to go ahead and say that she is making a lot of hard eye contact during this recollection of what occurred. And while this isn't damning for her, it doesn't mean that she is lying. It is interesting that she's not looking off to any direction to be able to remember or recollect or put herself in the mental state as to where she was then. She's looking dead into the person's eyes, and there's no indicators of recollection. Now, does that mean that she's not recollecting? Not really, no. But it is an interesting tidbit to be able to note. And then she also has this line in here where she says, and then what happened was, and then and then she continues on, and that little segment there is buying time. Now, is that because she doesn't know what she's about to say and she's just throwing in a little phrase to buy that time? Maybe. It also is the possibility that there is deceit happening there and she's having to compute that deceit as she moves on forward. Regardless, there is something that's happening here, whether or not it's a genuine story or a lie. There's not enough non-verbally to say.
Member of it. However, it's interesting because after that, I never told anybody about that, and I just buried it in the back of my mind.
So her blinking has increased. This is an indicator of psychological processing oftentimes. She's looking down and around as she's trying to possibly recollect or at least gather her thoughts. But then she says, I never told anybody anything. After that, you can hear her vocal tone get a little bit thinner, a little bit more fragile would be another way of putting it, and the pitch increases. This is a sign of agitation, of nerves. There's something that's happening around that. Perhaps she did tell somebody and she's keeping it secret, or perhaps the fact that she didn't tell anybody and the emotional weight behind it could be causing that agitation. Regardless, there's agitation around that area. If I had the ability to ask, I would push a little harder there.
And me and my brother, we never even spoke about it until the last few years.
Why, Randy?
So she has some small micro movements in with her larger movements there, and that is synchronized. So I actually would believe her on that front that she didn't actually speak to her brother about it. I don't know why, I don't know the context, but that does seem to be pretty synchronized so far. She didn't talk to at least her brother about it.
Pretty much it, but I mean, I ran up to their room completely terrified because they had put me out for a little over an hour.
So you can see these pretty substantial head shakes. No, I went up to the room completely terrified. Now, those larger movements are more conscious, and oftentimes they can mean that they don't have emotional meaning. I hope that makes sense. If there are smaller micro movements, no, then that would be a larger indicator of possible desynchronization. Like I said, since this is a video review on YouTube, this isn't going to be very in-depth. It's not going to be a scientific journal. It's going to be an entertainment possibility for you. So far, though, that overt head shaking of a no shake like this, the American no shake, that kind of lends us to believe that it's not really telling at all. Let's keep watching.
And when I came to, I ran out. First thing was I didn't know if I was going to get upstairs where my mom and dad's room where it was. I mean, it was that kind of fear. And
seen a lot of prevalent lip compressions in there, where he's biting back negative words or emotions or something along those lines. Negative connotations are being withheld. My question is, why is that? Why are there negative connotations being withheld in this specific sphere? What isn't he saying? He's wanting to say something, but he's subconsciously not being able to say it. I'm curious as to what it is. Is it really that he's lying and what he's wanting to say is the truth? Or is there some other detail that he feels is just too much for the audience? I don't know. Regardless, something's happening there.
And I have a hard time with this.
Why?
So now we see that his mouth is doing some odd movements with the corner of his mouth being pulled down, and to the side here you could see that coming out where he's saying that is a partial expression of fear. Anytime that you see the corners of the mouth being pulled down and to the side like that, that is an indicator of fear. And this doesn't mean that he's like terrified or even really the word afraid itself. It just means that there is something that's unsettling or off about that he finds perhaps threatening or uncomfortable. Let's see what happens.
Because I don't want to believe it. I really don't.
Why? Because I'm thinking I wouldn't mind it happening to me.
But yeah, that's what everybody
If it happens
says.
to you, if it happens
That's
to you,
what
you
everybody
feel different.
says. But it's totally made me question what life's about, and it stirred my life up a lot. And
So when it happened at 10, you always believed...
So I'm seeing synchronized nonverbal communication from him. He is diverting his gaze a lot, which doesn't actually mean deceit. There is a lot of research that has gone into whether or not a person looks at a person's eyes or looks away when they're telling lies, and it's kind of a person-to-person basis. So since we don't have his baseline, I'm not going to read into him looking away. That could just be part of it. However, I will say that during times of shame or discomfort, it's harder to hold a person's gaze than it is when you're feeling fully confident. But regardless, he is feeling uncomfortable, perhaps ashamed of this, and his nonverbal communication before that was synchronized with his words, which would push me in the direction of him being authentic. Now, whether or not that's evidence for aliens is still not sufficient for me because I haven't seen them. There hasn't been enough proof for me to be able to see them to really stake my name on that. Regardless, what he experienced is something that he felt he experienced as indicated by his synchronized nonverbal communication.
Profoundly.
No, I hoped there was something wrong, and I went through a lot of testing and things to find out whether something was wrong.
So that was the first.
That was interesting where he said, I went through a lot of testing. It felt off to me, and there's a few reasons why. One, his tone was lightly different. It has a little bit more of a hollow tone when he gets around to saying, I did a lot of testing. He also has a smile that reaches mostly one side of his face. That's not a common thing for him from what I've seen so far. His smiles are actually quite synchronized. If you even flash back to this portion here where he's laughing, genuinely laughing, you can see that the smile is quite symmetrical on both sides of his face. So when he's saying it this area and it's on the one side, it could be based out of contempt or aversion thereof where he feels like he has moral or intellectual superiority surrounding that specific point. My question is, what happened there? What was happening with the testing that we're not privy to? What is going on that he's not saying? We don't know. Let's see.
First time it happened,
First
times
time.
again, yeah.
Yeah.
They didn't find anything wrong.
Yeah. And so,
And then it was 1990 when they came again, and I was probably conscious for 5 seconds before they put me out.
so you were awake,
Yeah.
and what happened?
They came in. I don't know where they came from. I mean, they were there so fast.
Where were you?
I was just laying down on my bed. I just came down to my bedroom. I just laid down, and it was instantaneous. They were just there. And
So his recollection is still fully characterized by lip compressions and this very steady and constant no shake throughout the entirety of the recollection. Now, he's already told us that he doesn't like that this has happened to him, so that would be an easy explanation for that no shake. The no shake would be remaining constant because the negative feelings centered around that are constant as well. So we can't really hang too much on the no shake. The lip compressions are still biting back of negative emotions or words or something along those lines. So that would synchronize as well. I haven't seen anything that has popped up in this area of deceit, which is fascinating to me. AKA, he believes what he's saying, from what I can tell. Let's see if there's anything that pops up that might throw a little bit of shade at that, so to speak.
wow, I just went into shock. I thought I was going to die. My life flashed before my eyes. And I remembered all the times that they had been there before to get me. And then they put me out, and I just...
To get me. When he has that false start there and then he rephrases it again, that's interesting. That means he's having complications psychologically with the words to get me, to get me, and he looks away, and it's a partial expression of shame with the lip compression and looking down and so on and so forth. But that interesting verbal pattern of to get me, it also has some falling off in the tone as well. So there's something that's centered around that to get me phrase that he's not comfortable with. The tone indicates that, the verbal patterning indicates that, and some of the nonverbal expressions that we're seeing also indicate that. I don't know what that is. But that is an area that I would push. Why was there some sort of psychological difficulty with the words to get me? What's going on there? Is he ashamed because he feels silly saying that aliens came and got him? Possibly. That would line up perfectly with what we saw. Is there something else that's going on? Also possibly. That would still line up with what we saw. I hope you're seeing some of the limitations here in real applicability from a video alone. There are a lot of limitations. I have no ability to interact with these people, so we don't get to ask the questions that we want.
remember bits and pieces of what occurred after that point, very fragmented. But what blows my mind is meeting other people that it's happened to. That's what blows my mind, because I talk to them and they know what I'm talking about. They're describing the same things, and it just blows my mind. I wish this was not happening, but I am getting so much, what do you call it, evidence from talking to other people that this is not uncommon, and this is.
I know, but still, all of us watching and
I know.
hearing you now are thinking, but where's the proof? It's just,
Right.
I wish I had it.
Well,
it's you saying it. Why don't, if it happens, and it happens all the time, Dr. Mack will, challenge this when we come back. Why not take a picture of them? Why not
I've tried. I'm pretty good with electronics, and I tried with cameras, motion sensor.
Interesting. I'm pretty good with electronics, and then he does a very overt mouth-touching gesture here that doesn't fit in with anything. He's not wiping his mouth. He's not itching anything. It's just up here, and then it's down, and it's something centered around, why didn't you take any pictures? This is suspicious to me. This would be an area that I would be really questioning pretty heavily in that area. Why is he acting so odd here? I've tried. His pitch has increased as well. His tone hasn't really changed in its consistency, but his pitch has gone up, which could be an indicator of agitation, which is in response to a little bit more heated questioning. But what is up with the mouth-blocking gesture in there in relation to trying to take pictures? Something's going on. I'm not sure what it is.
Cameras, video cameras.
Tripwires.
Everything.
The mission of ATIP was quite...
A lot of nose shaking, a lot of odd lip compressions from him, not so much from her, but from him. But what's interesting to me is that outside of the few anomalies that I pointed out, it was quite synchronized throughout most of it, which indicates to me that at very least this gentleman believes what he's saying. He believes that what he experienced is genuinely what happened, from what I can tell. Obviously, like I said, this is very limited. It's an old video, and I have no chance to actually ask questions, which there were areas which we would have asked questions. Now, in real life, if I had been there and we could ask those questions, then that would be where we could really unearth the actual truth, by pushing in those weak points that we saw in their narrative. That's how this would actually work. From this point, I would have to say I believe him based off of what we saw. I believe that he believes him based off of what we saw here. Let's see what this next part is. It looks like it's a little bit newer video quality here. And let's see if there's anything that is going to be interesting in regards to, well, alien activity.
It's simple. It was to collect and analyze information involving anomalous aerial vehicles. What I guess in the vernacular you call them UFOs. We call them UAPs.
You know how...
I think he's describing his job as to what he needed to do with collecting data on UFOs, or UAPs, I believe is what he said. And the only thing that has been notable as far as straying from this initial little shot that we have here is that he has a few lip compressions in there mixed with a mouth shrug. So there's a biting back of a negative emotion, and that pushing of the chin where it pushes up the bottom lip and makes that little frowny kind of face there, that is a mouth shrug, which could be an indicator of uncertainty. So there is negative emotion and uncertainty centered around what his job description was and the topic of UFOs. Let's see what happens.
the sounds. It sounds nutty, wacky.
Look, Bill, I'm not telling you that it doesn't sound wacky. What I'm telling you is real. The question is, what is it? What are its intentions? What are its capabilities? Imagine a technology that can do 600 to 700 G-forces, that can fly at 13,000 miles an hour, that it can evade radar, and that can fly through air and water and possibly space. And, oh, by the way, has no obvious signs of propulsion, no wings, no control surfaces, and yet still can defy the natural effects of Earth's gravity. That's precisely what we're seeing.
So what do you say to the skeptics?
That was a lot of information to be able to work through right there. Some things that stuck out to me non-verbally speaking is that he's using some very prevalent illustrators with talking on his hand. He is also recalling and recounting things as he's speaking of them with the ums and the uhs as he's trying to construct what his words are going to be as he says them. These aren't really indicators either direction, but if I had to say, okay, so this is one way or the other, I would say that these are more in line with authenticity as well. The illustrators that he's using and the way that he's recollecting seems to be more synchronized. That being said, there's not enough to really go off of to say, oh, he's being deceitful in this. He is still maintaining the lip compressions / mouth shrugs in there, which is insincerity and negative emotion. So possibly, with those lip compressions and mouth shrugs being the primary indicator, there's the possibility that he's being somewhat deceitful here, or at least not revealing the whole truth. If we're being realistic here, it's likely he's not revealing the whole truth. There's something happening that we're not aware of, but we don't get to ask the questions. So let's see if the interviewer asks any of these questions that we're having.
It's refracted light, weather balloons, a rocket being launched, Venus.
In some cases, there are simple explanations for what people are witnessing, but there are some that are not. We're not just simply jumping to a conclusion that's saying, oh, that's a UAP out there. We're going through our due diligence. Is it some sort of new type of cruise missile technology that China has developed? Is it some sort of high-altitude balloon that's conducting reconnaissance? Ultimately, when you have exhausted all those what-ifs and you're still left with the fact that this is in our airspace and it's real, that's when it becomes compelling and that's when it becomes problematic.
So during that time, he uses the eyebrow-raising expression often. Now that expression has a myriad of meanings. If we're just going off of the emotional state alone, say it's an emotional response, it could be in the fear or surprise area of emotion. However, when it's in regards to what's being said as well, they can be used as amplifiers to the words that are being spoken. Anytime that somebody wants to make a point, their eyebrows will often raise, as you saw mine do just a moment ago. So that doesn't mean that he's lying. That doesn't mean that he's telling the truth. So far from what I'm seeing, he's stating facts, and he's not showing any anomalies in his nonverbal communication, which that's what I'm on the lookout for here with these universals that I'm trying to kind of navigate with, are anomalies. And there weren't any anomalies that stuck out to me that would be outside of what I can establish as his loose baseline. He speaks in a certain way, which you can get the feeling of the way that he speaks, and there were no changes or spikes from that were notable. So that kind of leaves us being like, okay, I guess I have to trust you for now. Let's see if anything else pops up.
You can sort of hear the surprise in their voices.
Okay, so I will note this. He has a lopsided expression on his mouth. It's not really contempt because we haven't been able to see how his face rests normally, so he could just have that lopsided expression in general. If it is actually a genuine tell, then that means that he has moral or intellectual superiority in regards to this. He has information that we do not, and it's showing up in his nonverbal communication. If that's the case. However, there's the distinct possibility that that's just how his face looks normally, so we can't really read into that. Let's see if we gather any more information.
Certainly can. They seem to have broke character a bit, and we're just kind of amazed at what they were seeing.
What do you think when you see something like this?
This is a difficult one to explain. You have rotation, you have high altitudes, you have propulsion, right?
So I'm looking at his face now, and his mouth does naturally lay that way, so that contempt thing that we brought up earlier can't be really held with any sort of weight unless we see something that's a little bit more overt. Regardless, we can't do anything with that. There's nothing that we can do, so let's see what else pops up.
I would say, the highest probability is it's a threat observation program.
Could it be Russian or Chinese technology?
I don't see why not.
Are you alarmed?
I am worried, frankly. If these were tactical jets from another country that were hanging out up there, it would be a massive issue. But because it looks slightly different,
massive issue, and then he licks his lips in there, which that is a self-soothing gesture. There's an agitation around that, related obviously to the it's gonna be a massive issue if this is from some other country in the world. That makes sense. Synchronized body language, that makes sense. So we're just establishing what we can see from his nonverbal communication. Let's see what that actually is.
We're not willing to actually look at the problem in the face. We're happy to just ignore the fact that these are out there watching us every day.
I never wanted to be on national.
So it's interesting. All of these people that have popped up so far haven't shown any overt anomalies for lying about things. The people earlier on who were abducted, or at least claim that they were abducted, believe as much from what we can understand from this small video. These people who say that they have worked in intelligence areas related to UFO sightings, they also have been displaying pretty confident and synchronized body language, which is also an indicator of authenticity. They could be lying. There is that possibility. It would be difficult to be able to see from what we're seeing so far. There is that possibility, but it is less probable that they are lying based off of the nonverbal evidence alone. Instead, it would almost seem as if they're being authentic. So let's see what else unpacks here, and then maybe we could talk about some of this at the very end.
TV, no offense.
So why are you doing this?
Because I was in a government aircraft, because I was on the clock. And so I feel a responsibility to share what I can, and it is unclassified.
So he's using spatial illustrators here as he's recollecting this sighting that they had. And that could be an indicator of authenticity. From what I can understand so far, it seems as though he saw something, he went down to inspect to see what that is, and he's using very prevalent spatial illustrators during that time as well, which, like I said, that could be a sign of authenticity. I don't know that this would be evidence for aliens, but it is evidence that he believes what he saw. Let's continue watching.
In front of me, it just disappears.
Disappears.
Disappears. Like gone.
It had sped off. What are you thinking?
So when he says it just disappears, he leans back and his eyebrows raise and his eyes open more wide, and that is an expression of surprise. That is synchronized with the it just disappears. That would be a shocking event to be able to witness, so that expression of surprise would make sense in there as well. AKA, he's still being authentic, and this is odd to me.
So your mind tries to make sense of it. I'm going to categorize this as maybe a helicopter or maybe a drone. And when
So during that time, we could see the corners of her nose have a little bit of action. During that time that she's smiling and referring to what it could be. And that little bit of action that we see there is a slight indicator of disgust mixed in with a smile. There's some sort of negative emotion, disgust emotion centered around that specific option that she listed. Why is that? Perhaps because it's one that's brought up regularly, so she has a little bit of disgust or scorn in regards to that. Not sure that's what her nonverbal communication is showing us so far. So far, there's still no desynchronization points that are large enough to be able to make note of.
it disappeared, I mean, it was just,
Did your backseaters see this too?
yeah.
Oh, yeah. There was 4 of us in the airplanes literally watching this thing for roughly about 5 minutes.
You know, I think that over beers, we've sort of said, hey, man, if I saw this solo, I don't know that I would have come back and said anything because it sounds so crazy when I say it.
You understand that reaction?
So she has that smile of contempt on her face, that partial expression of contempt. And that does make sense. That is in relation to the words that she's saying there. I would not have come back and said it. It sounds crazy, so on and so forth. And contempt would fall in line emotionally with the words that she's saying. So we're seeing from both of them authentic synchronized nonverbal communication, which I don't know if we're going to see enough of this to see if they have any desynchronization points. But we do know that when they speak, they are synchronized in what would be considered a fairly universal way. There's not too many specific individual tells that are setting them apart from anybody else that we haven't made note of. So if we see it pop up and there's some desynchronization points, then we can really hone in on those a little bit better now, knowing that they're not just possibly a tick. Let's go ahead and keep watching.
I do. I've had some people tell me, you know, when you say that, you can sound crazy. And I'll be honest, I'm not a UFO guy.
But from what I hear you guys saying, there's something.
Yes.
Oh, there's definitely something that, I don't know who's building it, who's got...
The emotion in her words. There's no vocal cord activity in that. It's just a whisper of a yes. And so that's interesting. There's no tone or pitch or anything to be able to go off of on that front. And what that could be an indicator of is an extremely soft tone whisper, if that makes sense, which whenever a tone drops that way to a more soft consistency all the way down to a whisper, that could be related to somberness, a somber emotion. There's weight behind what she's trying to say, and we don't know what that is. There wasn't anything else to be able to really go along with that. From what I could see, she didn't have any micro movements no during that point, and he's talking as well, but from her side of things, it was synchronized, if somber, if very emotional. Interesting.
The technology, who's got the brains, but there's something out there that was better than our airplane.
We spend millions of dollars in training these pilots.
Okay, so we're back over to this other gentleman now. I'm perplexed. I've got to be honest, I'm kind of perplexed here because I walked into this expecting to be able to see just a myriad of people who are just lying and making up stories and so on and so forth, and maybe even, you know, for the sake of having a great video, showing it quite prevalently non-verbally. But this is what I'm seeing so far, is a lot of synchronized nonverbal communication from these people. It's been fully synchronized all the way throughout their illustrators, throughout their expressions, throughout their recollection. Even as they're recollecting their stories, they're doing things that are common for people who are authentically recollecting, remembering details and adding them into various parts of the story, the narrative itself, to be able to add more weight or flesh out that area a little bit more. This is different from packing the narrative with extraneous details to divert. They're simply adding the details that need to be there. These are possible indicators of authenticity. Now, there's the possibility that since all of these people worked in the government, I'm assuming since they worked in intelligence centered around UFOs, you probably are in the government with that, but if they're working in that area, then they could have been trained on nonverbal communication and more or less how to keep secrets well. And if that's the case, then that kind of makes it more difficult, even more difficult for me, sitting here watching only a video of them without the ability to actually interact. There's that distinct possibility. Regardless, we're back over to this guy. Let's see what he has to say.
And they are seeing something that they can't explain. Furthermore, that information is being backed up on electro-optical data, like gun camera footage, and by radar data. Now, to me, that's compelling.
Inside the Pentagon,
I tried to help my colleague Lou Elizon.
Oh, okay. Looks like we're over at a different person here. He seems to be telling the truth. He has a lot of lip compressions in there, but he's also nodding in affirmation with that. And there's not really an area to see if he's lying or not, but it is hammering home this idea that he's being authentic and synchronized throughout everything, which if that's the case, then that raises a whole lot of questions for us, but not any that we can really answer as of yet. Looks like we're about to start speaking to another guy here. Let's see what he has to say.
Elevate the issue in the department and actually get it to the Secretary of Defense.
I'm going to note, if you look at the shape of his mouth while he's speaking, he has that upward corner of his mouth towards his nose pulled up a little bit. That's his resting state while speaking. So if we see something active come out there, we have to keep that in mind. It has to be a spike from that state. We can't just misread a tell because we want it to be there. Also, if we see more activity come into the other side of his face that is more inactive while he's speaking, then that could be a more prevalent tell. Now there's suddenly activity where there was none before. That would be a spike. So these are things that I immediately take notice of and have to keep track of as we continue viewing his footage to see if there's any spikes from his nonverbal baseline during that time. Let's see.
Christopher Mellon served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence for Presidents Clinton and George W. Bush and had access to top-secret government programs.
So it's not us. That's one thing we know.
We know that.
I could say that with a very high degree of confidence.
So he's synchronized at that point. While he's saying it's not us, his head is shaking, micro movements, no. And then he could say, I have a high degree of confidence in that point, and he is nodding yes. Those are 2 points of synchronization to his verbal patterns. That is an indicator of authenticity from what we can see so far. Interesting.
It's in part because of the positions I held in the department, and I know the process.
Okay, and I know the process, and just a teeny tiny little bit of a flash of squinching of the nose, a little bit of action in the corners of the nose down in here. The eyes are squinting. That's the expression. I'm trying to remember what that specific expression is communicating. He's doing that expression. It's not a deceitful expression, but maybe it's a mixture between contempt or anger or something in that area with the eyes, where the narrowing of the eyes are usually an indicator of that. Could also be calculation would be a thing when somebody looks at you in a calculated way, narrowing their eyes as well. And then the other activity could be an indicator of disgust or confusion, perhaps. Very interesting display. I gotta be honest, I'm not exactly certain what that teeny tiny flash was. Curious. Looks like we've got some different quality of footage here from a ways back. So let's see what they're going to say now, and then we'll just continue working through this video.
There's two types that I see.
Well, I gotta say, I can already tell this is like a documentary or a TV show or something like that we're watching. It's not just the found footage, because the wonderful illustrations that are over the top and the the music and all that, man, they are hamming this up to seem really eerie. But lady's about to start speaking, so let's see.
One type is about 3 feet tall, very dark, very ugly, not humanoid at all. The others are very, very tall, very lizard-looking, not...
Expression of fear. The lower half of her face is doing that expression of fear that I mentioned earlier in the video, where the corners of the mouth are being pulled down to the sides like that, and that specific expression. Now, she's not likely feeling fear in this area, but it could be uncertainty or an oopsie. I don't know. I hate using that specific word, oopsie, during this area, but it does so well at explaining the look, that oops, oopsie kind of look. So that's popping up here, which isn't a great indicator for sincerity, in my opinion, with that oopsie expression in there. It could just mean that she knows that this is weird sounding, so there's that flash of fear, maybe concern of being judged oddly or something along those lines. But it also could be an oopsie in that I am telling a lie, and I know I shouldn't be. Both of those are possibilities. Let's see what else happens here.
pleasant.
The creatures that I have seen mostly have been the grays.
And when I say tall, I'm not talking 6 feet. I'm talking very tall, like 10 feet tall.
Usually about 3.
A lot of aggression there from her in that area. She's using her eyebrows to amplify her points, but she's also doing a lot of prevalent nodding like that, and also holding very direct eye contact as well. These are all possible signs of aggression. It's interesting that she's really wanting to hammer home the idea that they're very tall. Okay, interesting, but let's keep watching.
3 to 4 foot tall, real big almond-shaped black eyes.
The face was oval. The being itself couldn't have been more than 3 feet tall. It was sitting cross-legged at the top left-hand corner of my bed.
Trying to keep up with all these different people and all the things that they're saying and what is happening non-verbally is just interesting. So these are happening pretty quickly, so it's difficult for me to even establish a loose baseline based off of what they're saying. I will say that with this girl that we just recently got through here, she's speaking very spatially as well. Well, they're over here in this exact area doing so on and so forth. And that's odd because not many people have had very crystal clear recollection of it. She's also not really flashing any of those possible expressions of genuine recollection as well. I would have questions for her. Why is she so detailed with it? This would be one of those areas where it might be a little too much detail. At very least, I need to ask some unassuming and covert questions to see if I can chip away at that area a little bit more. But why is she so detailed with like positioning down to exact areas in the room? Curious details to be adding in. Could be compensating because it probably or could be not true.
Well, my experiences started when I was very young. I can remember as far back as 6 years old, being in my room, being, just going to bed, and then aware that there were 6 light shafts coming down through the ceiling and would stand around my bed. And
so something that I will also note about her face now that I'm getting to see it a little bit more often, with that fear expression that definitely was there before, it was amplified by the fact that that's how her mouth also seems to move more naturally. So it wasn't as overt of a fear or oopsie expression that I mentioned before, but it was still existing because it still strayed from her normal resting state. That is something that I've made note of. And it also had a small flash of it in there again, right around the area where she was talking about the light shafts that were coming in. Just interesting. Let's keep watching.
Start turning into a human-like looking form.
They do seem to be able to walk through walls and materialize. I thought for a while they were ghosts when I was younger, but these beings materialize into a physical form, so it's hard to say. They might be from another dimension, so to speak, or anything like that.
He has trouble believing that as well. So when he's saying, I don't know, it could be from another dimension, so to speak, he shrugs, a partial shrug in there. He's also shaking his head no. And that is more or less just an indicator that he finds it also unbelievable, which doesn't actually push us towards deceit in that area. It's more common for a person who is being authentic to admit their own flaws or admit their own possible insanity or the sound thereof in their narrative than it is for somebody who's being very deceitful. And if we're basing it off of that area, his would seem more authentic than perhaps the first lady who flashed the fear expression. She was very confident in hers, and it didn't offer any leeway. He more or less has shown us that he finds it unbelievable himself, which is more of an indicator of possible authenticity. Let's keep watching.
This being rushed at me across the bed. She had a tool in her hand and she was performing some mysterious procedure on me.
What did it involve?
I wasn't allowed to lift my head, so all I could see was what I could see looking down across my face. And I saw the tool. I don't even want to know what she was doing. It was horrible. It was frightening, and it.
So with what I'm seeing in her everything so far is that she is looking off and to the side in that possible expression of genuine recollection. But after that part where she says it was horrible, she has a dry swallow in there, which could be an indicator of nerves, which there's all sorts of explanations for that. She also has a lip compression in there as well, and a mouth shrug that you could see in the action of her chin, all happening at once. So there's some sort of negativity that's going around that. Either one, it's synchronized with what she's saying. It was an awful experience, and the indicators non-verbally play out after that. Or she says it's an awful experience, and these indicators that we're seeing could just as easily be an indicator of deceit, that it wasn't exactly what she is portraying. I don't know. This has proven to be a quandary. I'm going to keep watching and we could talk later.
Lasted a long time.
There's a certain sensation that you feel when they are around. It's not something you go looking for. It's all of a sudden, it's a sensation within your cell structure, actually.
Has Professor Mack been a help?
It's a sensation within your cell structure. I'm sorry. There's no scientific evidence that you can feel changes in your cell structure. As far as my understanding goes, correct me if I'm wrong, scientists out there that you know more about the anatomy and the feelings thereof in the body, can you feel changes in cell structure? I would argue no, that you cannot feel changes in your cell structure, which means that she's really adding some details to her narrative that are questionable, would be a way of putting it, which means that she has less authenticity than the other people. I don't hold as much weight to her narrative as I have to the other two people that have been speaking so far. She seems to be too aggressive, too dead certain, and also packing in these extra weird details that are questionable in and of themselves. I don't buy her narrative. That's what I'm saying.
He's been a big help. The biggest thing he's done for me is because of who he is. I went to him because I really wanted him to tell me that, I was hallucinating, or there was something physiologically wrong with me, or maybe I was just plain crazy. And he didn't. And after listening to me, and he looked me right in the eye and said, you're not crazy.
The explanation is this.
I don't know that I would say they're not, I don't think they're crazy either, honestly, is what I'm trying to say. With hers, I still have difficulty believing it. I don't know who this person is that she went and saw, but I still have difficulty believing it. If she was to come into my office and be like, hey, let's talk about this, from what I've seen so far, not super believable. But that's interesting. At least she had the wherewithal to want to go to somebody to find out if she was insane. But from the narrative that she's told, it seems as though she really wanted to not be insane, rather than what she said she wanted to be, to find out that she had hallucinations and all that. I hope that makes sense. Very interesting. Let's see what this guy has to say.
It's a crazy one.
Did you ever think you were going crazy?
No. Nope. The only thing that I...
Synchronized, yes. There was a nope, and then there was a no with a lip compression after that. Interesting that she finds the need inside herself to have to re-say no, and then there's a lip compression afterwards, immediately after that. And I find it odd. I would also find it pretty odd that she wouldn't have that sinking feeling that perhaps she was losing her mind if she experienced things like this. At very least, if you put yourself in her shoes, which, by the way, putting yourself into another person's shoes is kind of a surefire way to become biased. So take this part or leave it. This isn't scientific. Put yourself in her shoes and imagine how you would feel if you started seeing things like that. Would you feel the possibility that maybe you were going insane? I know I would. I know that many people would, but perhaps this is something that she just has more confidence in that area than perhaps the general population. Her nonverbal communication didn't necessarily indicate that. And just based off of bias assuming, I suppose, it would also make sense that she might be bending the truth a little bit there. She might feel like she's a little bit insane. But even the fact that she doesn't think she's insane is another one of those things to where it's not an indicator of authenticity all the time. It could be an indicator of deceit. A person who has seen aliens and has no doubt in their mind that they saw aliens and never questioned whether or not they were going insane is more odd than a person who saw aliens and was convinced that they were nuts. Different stories. I hope that makes sense. Let's wrap this up.
Thought might be possible is that there was something that was causing a very consistent experience. What that something was, I didn't know, but I never thought that I was crazy.
That was weird. Okay. Sounded kind of like she was like, no, there could have been things that made this happen again and again, but I wasn't crazy. Okay. Oh, my goodness. I feel like I have more questions than when I started this video. And I'm sure that's going to convey really well to you guys who are watching this hoping to be able to get some clarification. More or less, from what I saw from most of these people was authentic nonverbal communication. Synchronized at most points. There were areas that I would have absolutely liked to push harder to see if there are indeed areas of deceit in their narratives. But if we're just going off of the little loose flash observations that we're able to do here, a lot of synchronized nonverbal communications, there were areas of shame, there were areas of discomfort, a lot of negative emotions centered around it, a lot of biting back of various words or emotions and so on and so forth, and all of those displayed in a fairly synchronized fashion, which, based off of just, if we're going exclusively scientifically on this, I saw so few indicators of possible desynchronization or deceit that I would have to say based off of just the nonverbals that I would believe them. Just off of the flash nonverbals. There was so little opportunity for reliable actual study in this that it makes it more difficult, but based off of just the nonverbals, they seemed authentic with some questionable points. So I am not saying that there are aliens. I'm also not saying that there aren't aliens. I have to be able to see the physical evidences of both to be able to make up my mind, and right now it's just greatly lacking. There never seems to be a high-quality video file of any sort of alien interaction, but there are a myriad of people who claim to have seen it. Now, there are plenty of researchers doing plenty of research in this area. I'm not going to dive deep down that rabbit hole. I'll probably continue doing some of these conspiracy theory style videos because they're entertaining and maybe we can unearth some dirt on some people as well. But for just this little segment alone, I don't know. I really don't know. I have to settle for believing that they believe themselves. And that is a bunch of people that are saying that they saw aliens. So are there aliens? Maybe, but we're still going off of people's words on that. And even though their nonverbal communication is indicating that they believe they're being authentic, that doesn't mean that what they believe is the actual factual truth. Interesting, right? Okay, so here's an idea. To maybe save my wife a little bit of time and a little bit of heartache and pain and a soul death, I don't know, would be another way of saying that. To be able to save her all of that torment. Why don't you go ahead and comment in the section below some clips that you would like me to watch, perhaps a video by name or something along those lines, and then I can take and point my direction at those and not have to have her involved. Because I like this ability for me to be able to dive into these not knowing what's going to happen, not expecting anything, to be able to rely on the universal and flash reading of nonverbal communication to be able to establish some form of information that we can get in. I like that. So if you have those opportunities for me, then I'll run them by her. She can kind of preview them, and then I will have them up on screen here. So leave them in the comments below. If you did like this video, go ahead and hit the like button. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the bell button if you would like to be able to see maybe some impromptu live streams, or just to be able to see the videos sooner as well, I suppose. I am going to try to start interacting with the comments a little bit here. I've been staying away from it pretty prevalently because there's a lot of negativity, and I have this weird thing to where if I comment on one comment, I feel like I have to comment on every comment, and I don't know. I'm going to try to get better at that. So you might be able to see some hearts or comments popping into the comment section here and there. I don't know, maybe, or maybe not. This video again was sponsored by Raycon. Go and follow the link in the description below to be able to get your own pair of Raycon earbuds. Like I said, they are excellent. I could not stress that enough. I love mine, and you get 15% off, which I think is a pretty good deal all the way around. So those are all of my things that I have to do, but without further ado, that's all that I've got for the day. My name is Logan, and you have been oh so awesome, as you always are. And I will see you in the next video. Cheers, guys. Just a second. The dogs are barking upstairs, Cal. I don't know if it's still not ready.